Well, thank you very much. Thanks very much to Pete Hegseth, and you should watch him on Fox and Friends on the weekend all the time. It's just a small plug. Look, it's a great pleasure to be here tonight. It's to be with all of you again and to share this evening with the honorees and their richly deserved tribute. I want to say it's a real pleasure to be here with a number of elected officials too. Assemblywoman Nicole Maliotakis, who's here, who had the courage to run for mayor of New York as a Republican. That's something. And Dan Donovan, whom you've heard from, and Lee Zeldin and Ron DeSantis. These are three of the strongest supporters of Israel in the House of Representatives, and it's a real honor to be with them. And a real privilege as well to be here with Israel's Minister of Justice, Ayelet Shaked. Speaking of someone with courage in these very difficult times. And, you know, we have talked several times ourselves about the International Criminal Court, the threat it poses to Israel through these very biased investigations or preliminary investigations that it's conducting. We just saw a few weeks ago the ICC, out of the goodness of its heart, has decided to investigate the United States' activities in Afghanistan. It's still in a preliminary stage, but I think it's going to be very important for the Trump administration, in this case, particularly having watched what Israel has gone through at the hands of the ICC, to make it clear that thank you very much. We can take care of ourselves. We don't need a bunch of international nannies telling us what our morality and law ought to be, and that we will handle it entirely on our own, as all democratic nations should. These are just some of the issues where Israel and the United States face the same problems and the same threats. I do want to talk just for a second, though, before I get into the threats, where there's always a longer list than the good news. The good news that Ron DeSantis and others have mentioned about what we're hoping to hear from President Trump this week in terms of the U.S. Embassy. And I think it's a real credit to Ron and the leadership that he has shown of the steps he's taken to show congressional support for actually doing what many presidents have said before, and that I think this president will do. The issue that he faces, I think, what's caused delay in the past and even in this administration, are the entrenched interests at the State Department that still think it's 1947. And, you know, maybe we've got some thoughts about how the Middle East should look, and we'll see what might be possible. You know, maybe UN General Assembly Resolution 181 still has life in it. Maybe there is a corpus separatum out there that we can put Jerusalem in. I think if the president says this coming Wednesday that he will recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, that it will say to the entire world that the United States will not be intimidated as to where it puts its own embassy. People have said for a long time, you know, if the United States were to move its embassy to Jerusalem, the peace process would be over. Well, what kind of peace process is it with the Palestinians that moving a building can destroy an entire process? What kind of snowflake is the peace process if that causes such mortal danger? Then there's the argument that says, well, you know, basically we think the embassy should be in Jerusalem, but just not now. Just not now. Time is not right. I've seen over and over again in the course of American diplomacy that when somebody says not now, what they really mean is not ever. So that's not an argument that should carry any weight. I said in my testimony before Congressman DeSantis' committee that when I was in the State Department, we used to joke that on the computer keyboards of the Near East Bureau all you had to do was type one key, just hit one key, and the full phrase would print out, at this particularly delicate point in the Middle East peace process, comma, there was something you couldn't do. And moving the embassy was always high on the list. One of the members of the committee asked me, well, when would you move the embassy? And I said, today. And that is, and that is what I hope we would hear from the president. We may not, but there's no question that doing something that even Harry Truman wasn't willing to do when he made the United States the first country to recognize the independent state of Israel. Even Harry Truman wasn't willing to say Jerusalem was the capital. But now I think we're going to hear it, and I think once that bridge is crossed, then it simply will be a matter of a few more steps, and we can break ground on a real American embassy in Jerusalem. You know, even the government of Russia earlier this year said that Jerusalem was going to be Israel's capital. Now, they had a few qualifications to that, as you might expect, but I didn't notice the end of the world when that statement came from Moscow. It won't be the end of the world here. Even the declaration of Israel's capital being Jerusalem, we're now told, will produce riots. And you know, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If the people who are predicting riots can't deliver the riots, then they'll be shown to be completely without any support. So we're going to have it simply because that's something that these political leaders in their hypocritical efforts to hold this up are going to try and produce. But this is theater. It's not serious. It will take a long time to build the embassy. There'll be ups and downs all across the Middle East. This is nothing that should stop us. The United States should not accept that these kinds of threats can prevent us from doing the right thing. Israel shouldn't accept it either. And together, I think we are going to end up in the right place with the embassy. And recognizing reality turns out, I think, to be the best way to get to lasting peace, not ignoring reality. Now let me just turn to the hard part here, and that is that I think the strategic circumstances in the Middle East today are getting more dangerous. I think even though the ISIS caliphate has all but fallen, that because of the strategy first adopted by the Obama administration of aiding the Baghdad government in substantial part, we aided others as well, the Kurds, parts of the Syrian opposition. At the end of the ISIS caliphate, unfortunately, the new shape of strategic reality in the Middle East is that Iran's influence has grown, and that it has created out of the ashes of the caliphate an arc of control stretching from its own territory through the Shia parts of Iraq controlled by the Baghdad government, linking up with the Assad regime in Syria and Hezbollah in Lebanon. We have reports just from last night that Israeli forces may have struck an Iranian base near Damascus, said to be a Syrian base, of course, but that's what's happened. The influence of Iran has grown as ISIS has been diminished, and that's a direct threat to Israel. It's a direct threat to America's Arab friends in the region. It is the beginning of the next struggle for hegemony geographically within the region between Iran and its surrogates on the one hand and the Sunni Arabs on the other. It's the struggle for hegemony within Islam that has gone on for centuries between Shia and Sunni. And I think it's one of the causes for the nuclear arms race that we see underway in the Mideast today, prompted in large part by this devastatingly bad nuclear deal that the Obama administration signed with Iran in 2015. All of these problems are now coming to bear on the Trump administration just 1 year in office, but nonetheless it's inheriting decades worth of issues. And although it may seem like a long way from the Middle East, I just want to stress why the president's decision on North Korea's nuclear weapons program will be so important. Because we are now, I think, at the stage where diplomacy, certainly with North Korea, has completely run its course. I suspect, I worry, I fear that diplomacy with China has run its course, and that North Korea's progress in both ballistic missiles and nuclear weapons has gotten to the point where analysts all across our political spectrum believe that it's only a very short period of time before North Korea will be able to hit any target it wants in the continental United States. Now, you know, when President George W. Bush referred to an axis of evil in the world, it wasn't just a literary metaphor. Iran and North Korea have cooperated on these issues for many, many years. North Korea sold Iran its first Scud missiles 25 years ago. They have worked together on ballistic missile developments ever since then. And why not? Because their objectives were the same, to put nuclear weapons under the nose cones of these missiles. This was not to launch weather satellites or communication satellites. So over the years, I think what North Korea learned, what Iran learned, they shared together. And that North Korea has simply demonstrated the extent to which its program has made progress more than Iran has. I think there's every reason to believe there's cooperation on the nuclear side as well. After all, their uranium enrichment technology for both of them was acquired by A.Q. Khan, the Pakistani nuclear entrepreneur who stole the designs from Urenco, the European uranium enrichment company. So their enrichment technologies have progressed together. A.Q. Khan sold them both their nuclear weapons designs, which he had stolen from Pakistan, which got them from China. We know that because another one of A.Q. Khan's customers was Libya. And when we got the Libyan nuclear weapons designs, they were written in Chinese. So that North Korea and Iran have a common enrichment technology, they have a common weapons design, and there's every reason to think that cooperation on the nuclear front was demonstrated by the reactor in the Syrian desert that Israel destroyed in September of 2007. So we don't know. Our intelligence in North Korea is particularly poor. We don't know how much of the Iranian program may be in North Korea. So when you hear all this talk about verification and compliance with the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, just remember North Korea was not a party to it for good reason, but that much of what Iran is doing could well be done in conjunction with Pyongyang. And even beyond that, any technology, nuclear or ballistic missile, that North Korea has today, Iran can have tomorrow by writing a large enough check. Let me just spell it out. You know, in Iran, you have a rich, eager buyer for this technology. In North Korea, you have a poor, eager seller. Anybody having any trouble with the shape of this transaction? That's why we should not be diverted by minutia about the Iran nuclear deal. The threat posed by North Korea is a global threat. It will sell anything it has to anybody, Iran, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, if they had hard currency, any aspiring nuclear power. So that the threat posed by North Korea is not just to South Korea, Japan, and the United States. It's a global threat. The way President Trump decides to handle that is going to be critical for how we deal with Iran and what I think would be the complete crash of counterproliferation policy worldwide. It won't just be Iran and North Korea that end up with nuclear weapons, but Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Turkey, and many, many others across the Middle East and beyond. So we're entering into a particularly dangerous period here for the administration, just 1 year into its tenure in office. And it's why people such as all of you in this room who care so much about Israel, about the U.S.-Israeli relationship, about the importance of strong national security policies to defend our innocent civilian populations against terrorists, whether they're suicide bombers or rogue states that seek to possess nuclear weapons. This is not the time to sit back. This is the time to redouble our efforts, because really the future is in our hands. And the quality of the people in this room, I think, demonstrates why we have every reason to be hopeful if we stay strong and if we stay united. Thank you very much.